Being someone who plays a couple of the games made by Hoyoverse and someone who is a casual enjoyer of the lore, I have always been intrigued by the game's use of character variants and the implications that all of these games are connected. In a previous video, I talked about how Gnosticism, an umbrella term for many variants of early Christianity, was the glue that connects all of these games together. Most of these games contains Gnostic elements or Gnostic terms that are supposed to work with one another, like how the Archons are the creation of the Demiurge, and the Demiurge being a creation of an Aeon and stuff, thus connecting all of them in a shared universe of some sorts. But then I notice a problem. While yes, Gnosticism is something that kind of connects and binds all of these games together, how and by what method these games are connected with, it remains a question. Because you see, Hoyoverse themselves have been adamant about making an interconnected universe for all of their games. But the way they have gone about doing it is a little bit confusing and sometimes contradictory to one another. See, there are those who believe that all of these Hoyoverse games are a part of like a great multiverse. And then there are those who are like me who believes that actually they're all in the same universe, not really a part of a multiverse per se. So who is right? For that, we must turn to quantum physics. Why did I say it like that? That's kind of corny as hell, bro. An aspect of quantum physics that most people might be familiar with, and is definitely the most popular thing about quantum physics, is the idea of the multiverse. Generally, it's the idea that the observable universe that we see is not the entirety of existence, and that there could be other variations of our existence, or extensions to our existence. For the sake of the video, we're going to be looking at only 2 variations of the theory of the multiverse. There is a lot more, of course, but I'm not including them, either because they are slight variants of the 2 we're going to talk about, or because they're incompatible with all of these Hoyo games. The most popular and the most used model of the multiverse theory that you might know of is called the quantum multiverse, which itself is a variant of the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. This theory was first proposed by physicist Hugh Everett in 1957, but was later popularized by Bryce DeWitt in the 70s. The theory was originally proposed as a potential solution to the measurement problem, which includes some paradoxes of quantum theory. Prime example would be the Schrodinger's cat experiment. The theory asserts that all possible outcomes of quantum measurements are physically realized in different worlds, or that all versions of a quantum event exist all at the same time. Because in quantum mechanics, particles don't have a fixed state until they are measured or observed. So, they exist in the superposition of multiple possibilities simultaneously, and when the particle is observed, the universe is split. Or another way of looking at it is all possible state of the particle all already exist alongside the one that we observe. Now, to translate that from English to brain rot, assume that you have 2 options, okay? Option A, you're with goth tomboys, and option B, you're with muscle mommies. You chose option A, goth tomboys, okay? And at the moment you made that choice, a version of you that chose option B, muscle mommies, also exist, or is created because the universe split, because the quantum event are both physically realized. This is the basis of the branching timelines model of the multiverse, which is quite common in pop culture. Stuff like the MCU, the Spider-Verse, anything Fate related, the Transformers franchise, all of them use this model of the multiverse because it's easy to understand and it's easy to create stories with. All you need to understand for it to work is most series that uses this use it on a what if premise. What if X didn't happen, or what if X characters died or live? This theoretically giving you unlimited options for storytelling. Hell, you could even skip world building if you want to, if you are making stories based on an existing series or IP. Which is why it's so popular, because you could then make a gajillion dollars from multiple spin-offs and side stories and alternate timelines, and people would still eat it up. The best part is you could even connect 2 different series that shouldn't connect and retcon them to be a part of the same multiverse. By the way, if you're enjoying these types of videos, do hit that subscribe button, and don't forget to follow me on Twitch, where I'm gonna cover these types of topics live, hopefully. I promise you I'll start to live stream again, okay? Just once we hit 1,000 subs, I'll start to live stream again. But don't forget to subscribe and follow, okay? There is a second model of the multiverse that isn't as popular in the mainstream, but it's still very interesting to talk about, and it's quite relevant to the Hoyoverse games that we're going to talk about. It's called the quilted multiverse theory, or another name for it is Tegmark's 4 levels of the multiverse, named after the physicist Tegmark, of course. But what this theory asserts is that matter in the universe only has a finite number of ways or patterns to arrange and rearrange itself. Given the vastness of the universe, it's possible that this pattern would eventually repeat. This theory, first of all, proposed that the universe is infinite, that our observable universe is in fact just that, the observable portion of the greater universe. The greater universe then is unobservable due to the limitation of the speed of light. But while the universe might be infinite, the number of ways matter can be arranged is not. So there is a possibility that things will repeat themselves. This is classified by Tegmark as a level 1 multiverse. Once again, translating this from English to a form comprehensible to the average Hoyoverse player, who I know don't know how to read, due to how big the universe is, right? There is a possibility that there is a second Earth, with a second you, who is also just as massive of a gooner as you are right now. Because if you could imagine Earth and your life as a gacha roll, it's completely possible for you to roll the same character more than once. Now, this model of the multiverse is technically not a multiverse in the usual sense, because these alternate versions of you won't be really alternate versions of you per se, but to look at it in a different way, imagine them as being aliens who look like you, that live like you, and even went through similar events much like you. I don't know, it's kind of strange, but we're already talking about quantum physics here. You might be wondering, why the fuck have I yapped about quantum physics for, I don't know, like the last 10 minutes? Well, the thing is, after reading more of the lore for Honkai Star Rail, Genshin Impact, and Honkai Impact, I realize, while these games are connected, the way they are connected is always confusing, or at least contradictory to one another. I mean, okay, the elephant in the room that caused me to even ask this question in the first place is the amount of character variance. Bro, this should be putting even FGO to shame, which has always made me wonder whether these variants are supposed to be, you know, a purposeful use of the multiverse or a lazy cop-out for character designs. But okay, so based on comments left in the previous video, it would seem that these games are a multiverse connected by the imaginary tree, which already on the surface seems to be a physical representation or manifestation of the branching multiverse, or the quantum multiverse theory. So what is the imaginary tree then? Okay, I'm gonna rip it straight from the wiki. It is the origin of life itself, as all universes and bubble worlds are born there. The imaginary tree emerged from the Sea of Quanta and has been trying to destroy each other. Time flows from the tree's trunk and branches out into an infinity of worlds, and the leaves of the tree is essentially a bubble universe. And then the Sea of Quanta is this primordial void that encompasses everything. We see an example of these alternate realities or world when Auto Apocalypse observes Tevat, the world of Genshin Impact, from the Sea of Quanta. So that should answer it, right? That yes, the Honkaiverse, the formal name of this multiverse, follows the quantum multiverse theory. And all is good then, right? That is until Honkai Star Rail was released. When Star Rail was released, the first characters we met was Kafka and Silveronia. And you know, we all thought, yeah, cool, a Bronya variant. That's nice. And then we get to Yarrow 6 and we met Kokoronia. What? And it's like, hold on now. How could there be two variants existing side by side? And no, Haxor Bunny does not count because she's already from an alternate timeline, okay? But nah, these are two Bronya variants from two different planets who are themselves distinct individuals from one another. I think you could already see where I'm going with this. In the Penacony storyline, Acheron, who's a variant of Raiden Mei, explains her origin story to El, which is surprisingly close to the events of Honkai Impact. So, she must have come from an alternate Earth then. Nope. Her planet's called Izumo. Another situation, Himiko. Her origin makes it sound like she's from an alternate Earth. But as we know now, her planet is called Plain Arcadia. It uses a similar calendar to Earth, and even looks like Earth, minus of course the brain rot creatures, but there's no mention of Earth in Honkai Star Rail, even though humans exist. Like normal humans. Not human-like species like those on the Xianzhou, or I don't know, like the Holovians, for example, who do look like humans but are technically not humans. And then there is Welt, who is the same Welt from Honkai Impact, but that's not what I'm going to talk about. I want to look at his journey, because his journey from Honkai Impact to Honkai Star Rail seems less like a multiversal travel through different timelines, but instead more like a straightforward space travel across the universe like Star Wars. Actually, minor correction, Earth is actually mentioned in Honkai Star Rail, but it's always mentioned in the context of it being Welt's homeworld. But the way it's said, it implies Earth as being just another planet in the universe rather than a place that's across the multiverse. You also have Amphorius being another story variant of the original Flame Chasers storyline from Honkai Impact, and characters like Sparkle and Sambo being able to travel just somewhat freely between both games. All of this points to a much different cosmology than what has been established in prior games. The way it has been presented, it seems that Honkai Star Rail uses the quilted multiverse theory, where the universe is so vast that patterns tend to repeat. We see familiar faces and even stumble upon familiar events from Honkai Impact, but it's now scattered across multiple planets in Honkai Star Rail. Now this kinda contradicts the multiverse model in previous games, which again uses the branching multiverse model. Now, there's nothing in quantum physics that says both models can't coexist, at least not explicitly. See, these different models of the multiverse was created to explain a different phenomenon, for each of them that could not be explained by regular physics. So much like in real life, there's not really any way to prove or disprove the possibility of both models being able to coexist with one another for the games. Because of this, I do feel like it's somewhat of a slight retcon, but again, I could be wrong about it. So I propose that all of these games are a part of a multiverse, just not in the usual sense, because I believe that Hoyo might actually be using a slight variation to the quilted multiverse theory. Maybe as a retcon, or maybe we've just been looking at the cosmology for these games wrong. Maybe. Now the variants are one thing, of course, because while some characters are variants in the usual sense, there are also variants like Bronya and Silverwolf who coexist with one another and are distinct individuals. And then there are variants who just look similar and might have similar experience, but are drastically different characters than their prime versions. We also have the very similar visuals that I've pointed out in the last video. And lastly, I think the most strong evidence for this is this conversation between Kiana, the main character of Honkai Impact, and a Memo Keeper, a character who's a part of a group that we find in Honkai Star Rail. The Memo Keeper noted that the events of Honkai Impact was able to send ripples across the cosmos. This ripple was felt even by the Memo Keepers, because Kiana was able to produce an impact, get it, that is on par or even more than an emanator. However, it seems that Earth is not under the gaze of any Aeons, and it is beyond the reach of even the Trailblaze. Now this conversation suggests a couple of different things. One is that it's somehow possible for Honkai Star Rail characters to travel to Earth without some multiversal vehicle or method. Two, that Earth is perhaps too far for anyone, which includes Aeons, to notice it. Three, there is something blocking the Earth from being reached by everyone. And four, it seems that the Earth of Honkai Impact is a part of the HSR universe. All of this evidence then suggests that the Honkaiverse is really actually based on Max Tegmark's Level 2 multiverse, which is also called the universes with different constant, where the multiverse, in this context, the multiverse here refers to the infinite universe and not alternative timelines, where the multiverse or space as a whole is stretching and will continue doing so forever. But some regions of space stop stretching and form distinct bubbles, which in this context means that the Earth of Honkai Impact exists in one such bubble, where it has its own rules and mechanics, and even being unable to be observed by the Aeons, because the bubble acts as a sort of barrier, I suppose. Genshin could also theoretically exist in another such bubble, although I'm still holding onto that, scepter theory. And Honkai Star Rail then takes place in the rest of the universe, which hasn't formed a distinct bubble. However, what doesn't help here is that because of the inconsistent or even vague translations, there seems to be a confusing use of the term worlds. In Honkai Star Rail, it usually refers to planets, but in Genshin Impact and Honkai Impact, it seems to refer to a couple of different things. Sometimes it's realms, sometimes it's timelines, and other times it's also planets. So what about the imaginary tree and the Sea of Quanta then? Well, from my point of view, it seems that the imaginary tree is less of a physical manifestation or representation of the branching timeline, but instead it's something that exists in this infinite universe to connect all of these different bubbles. Closest parallel I could give it is something like the Force from Star Wars, where it binds the universe together and connects these bubbles that exist in the universe. The Sea of Quanta then is pretty much like how dark matter is in real life, where it engulfs and encompasses the empty space around existence. Don't worry, I've made a very professionally made diagram to illustrate my point. So, over here, okay, as you can see, the big thing here, that's the universe. That's where Honkai Star Rail takes place. The empty space here, that's the Sea of Quanta, right? Okay, cool. And then the tree that grows out of the Sea of Quanta grows into the universe and then connects to all these bubbles. I don't know if you could see it, but I wrote Honkai Impact takes place in this bubble, and then you have Genshin here, and then you have Zenless Zone Zero here. Maybe, I don't know. I should get a PhD by now. To simplify it, basically, what I'm proposing is that the tree itself is not the multiverse, but instead, it's something that connects these worlds together. The tree itself shows strong connection to civilizations, which is strange if it was simply the multiverse manifested, like the MCU's version of the sacred timeline. At least with how it's worded, it does not seem that the tree or the sea is the universe itself, but rather they exist outside of it. And the growth of the tree is always associated with the growth of civilization. Again, it seems that the tree has a much closer relationship to life than it does with the universe or space. Now, there is a couple possibilities about all of these inconsistencies that we see. Possibility number one is that this could be a retcon on how the imaginary tree and the Sea of Quanta actually works. Because if you think about it, the only game that has explored the imaginary tree and the Sea of Quanta is Honkai Impact. And now I might not be so familiar with the lore of Honkai Impact, because again, I've last played it a while ago, so I might be forgetting a couple things here, but it's quite reasonable to think that they might be renewing the way that the imaginary tree works, especially that the Gnostic elements seems to be taking center stage, and that all of these games are now revolving themselves around these Gnostic elements, so it doesn't make sense that, the Archons and the Aeons exist in two separate timelines. Well, the whole thing about them is that the Archons are a creation of the Demiurge, and then the Demiurge is a creation of an Aeon. Especially now that we know Honkai Impact is connected to Honkai Star Rail in a more direct manner, it seems kind of strange for it to be connected via a multiverse and not them existing in the same universe. There's also possibility number two, in which we've just been looking at the lore and the mechanics of these games from a inaccurate or maybe even wrong perspective, and that we've been using our personal biases and our own personal understanding of other franchises and imposing them on this franchise. But all of this is a theory. Again! Yeah, I'm not gonna do that actually. Look, for all we know, it could just be Hoyo retconning the multiverse they already did, Or some plot hole they accidentally made because of lazy writing, which is still a possibility. But it's still fun to think about. And I think it serves as a good explanation for all of these character variants. If not, it's a coping mechanism. And also it might explain why these games all have very similar visual language. Again, I referenced this back in the previous video with all the cube or pixel looking things. They all look the same across 3 games. I don't know if that's supposed to mean anything, but do let me know what you think about the video, and do share your own thoughts about this topic in the comment section below, because I would love to read some of it.
Thank you.